In the late 15th century, the Iberian Peninsula was divided between two worlds, the fading Muslim kingdom of Granada and the rising Christian kingdoms of Castile and Aragon, led by Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. For nearly 8 centuries, Muslims had ruled parts of Spain, creating a civilization known for its science, art, architecture, and tolerance. But by the 1400s, the tide had turned. One by one, Muslim strongholds fell until only Granada remained, a glittering city surrounded by mountains, with the majestic Alhambra Palace standing as a symbol of Islamic power and culture. Queen Isabella of Castile, driven by a fiery mission to unite Spain under Christianity, set her eyes on Granada as the final prize. She believed it was not just a political war, but a holy war, a crusade to erase Islam from Spain forever. Meanwhile, the people of Granada lived in constant fear. Farmers worked the land under the shadow of Christian armies. Merchants in the bazaar whispered rumors of betrayal, and scholars in the madrasas prayed for divine protection. The city was beautiful but tense, its fate hanging by a thread. As Isabella and Ferdinand built their armies, alliances were made, sieges prepared, and a plan to conquer Granada slowly unfolded. This was not just the story of a war, but the story of a civilization's last breath in Europe. And it all began with the relentless ambition of a queen who would stop at nothing to see her vision fulfilled. The year was 1482, and the fragile peace between Granada and Castile finally shattered. Small clashes at the borders escalated into full-scale battles, as Isabella and Ferdinand declared their holy campaign against the Muslim kingdom. The Christians had powerful armies, trained knights, and the support of the church, which promised salvation to anyone who fought against the Moors. Granada, once a beacon of strength, was now weak and divided. Internal rivalries tore the kingdom apart, as different factions of nobles argued over power while the threat outside grew larger each day. Queen Isabella moved with determination, mobilizing resources, collecting taxes, and ensuring that weapons and supplies were always ready. She turned this war into not only a military conquest, but a spiritual duty, framing herself as the chosen defender of Christianity. On the other side, the Muslims of Granada felt trapped. Farmers could no longer harvest safely, families saw their villages burned, and soldiers had to defend long borders with limited support. The first Christian attacks targeted small towns and fortresses, and one by one they fell into Isabella's hands. The siege was not only fought with swords, but also with starvation, fear, and betrayal. For the people of Granada, every passing day was a reminder that their world was closing in, and the final battle for their survival had begun. By the late 1480s, the once proud city of Granada was trapped in a tightening grip. Christian armies surrounded the kingdom from all sides, cutting off trade routes and supplies. Villages outside the city walls were burned, their people forced to flee, while the great Alhambra Palace loomed above the suffering streets like a silent witness to history. Inside the city, fear grew stronger with each passing month. Bread became scarce, meat almost impossible to find, and disease spread in the cramped neighborhoods. Mothers tried to calm their hungry children, while fathers took shifts guarding the walls with weapons that grew dull and old. Queen Isabella, relentless in her vision, pushed her soldiers to maintain the pressure. She built forts around Granada, so close that smoke from their fires could be seen from the Alhambra itself. Her strategy was clear: starve the city, break its will, and force it into surrender. The sultans of Granada tried to rally their people, promising that help would come, but no allies arrived. Muslim powers in North Africa were too divided to send an army, and the Ottomans were too far away, consumed by their own wars. Hope began to fade, and whispers spread through the streets of Granada that perhaps Allah had abandoned them. Yet still, the call to prayer echoed from the mosques, reminding the people that their struggle was not just for survival, but for their faith and their entire way of life. As the siege dragged on, Granada was not only crumbling from the outside, but also tearing itself apart from the inside. The ruling Nasrid dynasty was split by rivalries, with Sultan Abul Hassan Ali, his brother El-Zagal, and his own son Boabdil fighting for control. Instead of uniting against Isabella and Ferdinand, the leaders of Granada plotted against one another, desperate to hold on to power while their people starved. Boabdil, known to history as the last king of Granada, was captured by the Christians in battle and released on the condition that he would secretly betray his own city. While the common people suffered, their leaders traded loyalty for survival, and each faction weakened Granada's strength a little more. Queen Isabella knew this was her greatest weapon, and she exploited it brilliantly. She played the factions against one another, offering promises of safety to one while striking deals with another. As Granada's rulers argued in their palaces, Christian armies closed in tighter, building more fortresses, cutting more supply lines, and tightening the noose around the city. The people of Granada whispered in the markets that betrayal was everywhere, that even their king could no longer be trusted. Faith in victory grew dim, and faith in their leaders nearly vanished. The enemy was not only at the gates, it was inside the very walls of Granada. By the winter of 1491, the once proud kingdom of Granada was breathing its last. The city was exhausted, its people starved and broken, its leaders divided and powerless. The Christian armies under Isabella and Ferdinand had built a massive camp outside Granada, a wooden city called Santa Fe, from which they launched their final operations. Supplies flowed endlessly to the Christians, while inside Granada the shelves of the markets were empty, and the cries of hungry children echoed in the narrow streets. Disease spread quickly, turning weakness into despair. The soldiers who once defended the walls now stood with trembling hands, their armor rusted, their eyes hollow from sleepless nights. The mosques that once rang with hope now carried only desperate prayers. In the Alhambra palace, Boabdil, the last sultan, faced the impossible. He knew his army could no longer resist, and his people could not endure another season of famine. Outside the walls, Isabella and Ferdinand waited patiently, confident that victory was already theirs. They did not need to break the gates. They only had to wait as the city collapsed under the weight of starvation. The fate of Granada, the last jewel of Muslim Spain, was sealed not with a great battle, but with the slow and painful suffocation of its people. On the 2nd of January 1492, the fate of Granada was sealed forever. After months of starvation and despair, Sultan Boabdil finally rode out of the Alhambra palace to meet Queen Isabella and King Ferdinand. With only a handful of loyal men by his side, he presented the keys of the city, a gesture that marked the end of 8 centuries of Muslim rule in Spain. The Christian banners rose above the towers of Granada, and the sound of church bells rang out across the valley, drowning the echoes of the call to prayer. For Isabella, it was the moment she had dreamed of. Spain united under the cross, a victory she claimed as divine destiny. For Boabdil, it was the ultimate humiliation. Legend says that as he left Granada, he looked back at the city for the last time and wept. His mother's bitter words are remembered even today. Do not weep like a woman for what you could not defend as a man. The people of Granada were promised religious freedom in the surrender treaty, but history would prove otherwise. Soon, mosques would be converted to churches, Arabic banned, and thousands forced to choose between conversion or exile. The surrender of Granada was not just the fall of a city, but the fall of a civilization and the rise of a new Spain built upon the ruins of Al-Andalus. The fall of Granada in 1492 was more than the loss of a city. It was the end of an era. For Muslims, it marked the closing chapter of Al-Andalus, a land that had once shone with knowledge, poetry, and science, now silenced under the weight of conquest. For Isabella and Ferdinand, it was the triumph that would shape Spain's destiny. That same year, they sponsored Christopher Columbus on his voyage across the Atlantic, beginning the age of European empire and colonization. The victory at Granada fueled the Spanish Inquisition, an era of fear where Muslims and Jews were forced to convert or face exile and persecution. Yet even in defeat, the legacy of Al-Andalus lived on. The arches of the Alhambra, the gardens, the libraries, and the echoes of Arabic words in the Spanish language remained as silent witnesses to a lost world. Granada became both a memory and a warning that power rises and falls, and civilizations can vanish when divided within and attacked from without. Today, the story of Granada reminds us of the fragility of greatness, the cost of betrayal, and the pain of intolerance. It is a story not just of Muslims or Christians, but of humanity itself, a lesson written in stone and blood. And it all began with the ambition of a queen who believed she was chosen by God to erase a civilization, but in doing so, carved a tragedy that history can never forget.